out of the way. So you should be able to see my screen. I'm just on the dashboard currently, which should look familiar to everybody. In case you don't know me, I'm Joanna from the EMHware support team. I know a lot of you on the call, some of you very well, others I've met a couple times, but like Peter said, I'm here.
You have reached Karen DeYoung's phone. Sorry, I can get to the phone. Leave a message.
Just make sure that you have yourself on mute if you're not already muted. And Peter, maybe if you could, I don't know if you have the control to mute people, just to keep the background noise down, just because we have a limited amount of time. So yeah, as Peter mentioned, I'm going to be showing you guys the consent module today and how it functions. I'm just going to be using one of my demo sites here. And we're going to go ahead and start from within a client file. So the reason for creating the consent module is historically our agencies have always created their consents and maintained their consents from within either the case data section of EMHware as a case data form, or they've uploaded them as attachments or a mixture of both. However, we know that a lot of our agencies wanted a better way to control adding things like expiry dates, being able to see different consents for different programs at a quick glance, and having just basic drop downs and additional information that you don't necessarily have in the case data section or as an attachment. So we created the consent module to kind of help out with that and help out with our agencies. We've worked directly with a couple of our agencies in particular to kind of nail down exactly what is needed and what agencies would like to see in the module. And we are constantly making updates and fixes and changes to the module as people start using it more. So as Peter mentioned, if you do have any questions as I go through, feel free to throw them in the chat or hold them just until the end. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start out of a client file. So I'm going to go into Ruby's file here. And once the consent module has been turned on in your agency, you will see another client tab in here when you're in a client file. So these ones here, these appointments, contacts, case notes, and case data should look familiar. But now you would see an orange consent tab in a client file once that module has been turned on. And just like the other tabs, you can click on that to open up the consent section. There is a little traffic light symbol here, which actually does function. So it's not just an icon, it is actually functioning. So if the client has up-to-date consents, then the light will be green. If they have consent that is coming up to be expired, then the light will be orange. Or yellow. And then if they have an expired consent, then that light will show up as red. So not just an icon, it does function as a quick way to kind of see the status of your client's consent. So once I've opened up the tab for the consent, of course, I have my gray area at the top where I can do a lot of searches. So if this client has a number of consents, I can use any of these fields to narrow down to see only the ones that I want to. And I can click on, of course, any of the ones that have already been entered. And I can see at a quick glance the status of the consent, as well as some other information like the start and end date, the worker, the program, and all that information there. If I wanted to add in a new one, of course, just like anything else, I have to go to the new plus sign to add in a new consent. And this is the page that I get when I'm adding a new consent. So as I mentioned, using the case data section and attachments does not allow you to have consent specific dropdowns and data collection like the consent module does. So as you can see here that we have the client's name, the start date of the consent, the end date, the program that it's applicable to, worker, again, will just default to myself. There is also the option to display consents in the client portal. So the client portal is another additional module that you can purchase that does work hand in hand with the consent module. If you're interested in that, just let us know. Then there's these three drop downs here for method, scope, and reason. And as you'll see in a second when I show you the consent administration, these drop downs are completely customizable by the agency themselves. So you can actually pick or put what you want in these drop downs that would display. So I can go ahead and put in whatever I want for these ones. I can check off if a substitute decision maker is required. I can still upload attachments. So the same as in any section of EMHware, if I have a paper copy of this or something and I want to upload it with this, I can do that using choose files. There is also an option to mark whether the consent is revoked. So I can mark that using this dropdown, which again is customizable. Any comments I can enter in here. Authentication, so consents, just like anything else, can be authenticated in the system, so they can be locked once they're completed. And here's where I can add in substitute decision makers or any circle of care entries. So if I was to click on add a substitute decision maker, this is linked to the client address book. So I can select from client address book, which would allow me to pick who I was saying is the substitute decision maker for this client, and that their information is going to populate here. I can also add in circle of care information. So again, this will pull from, you can pull this from the agent or from the client address book. So I can say that this person or this agency is involved in the circle of care for this consent. And again, there's more drop downs and comments boxes here as well. And then at the very bottom of the consent page, you can specify a consent case data form. So because everybody's so used to using the case data section, we figured it was a good idea to be able to specify the type of consent and be able to fill that right out in this section. So I can pick in the supplementary form dropdown, this would be a list of any consent forms or any case data forms that you've asked us to build into the consent module. So this could be existing case data forms that you've already been using historically as consent forms, or if you have new ones, we can add them in there as well. So you can see when I pick that, it populates the case data form down here at the bottom. So just like a regular case data form, I can go through, I can fill it out. It will populate client information like their name and date of birth, as well as the electronic signature line. So I would be able to fill all of that out just like I can in a regular case data form. And then I can save this consent in the client's file. The start and end date, the end date for the consent will, you can set that up to how long you want that to default to. In this site, it's set obviously to 365 days, but as you'll see when we look at the consent administration, you can make that whatever you would want. So you can go ahead and save and authenticate that consent for the client. So now I'm just going to show you the global consents tab. So up at the top, once we're out of a client file, so we can enter them in a specific client file, or we can look at the consent module from the global tab up here. And this is important because this is where you're going to go. If you have admin privileges in your site, this is where you can go to see the consent administration, which is really helpful. Another great thing about this module is that the agencies have control, like I mentioned, of the dropdowns and a lot of the defaults within the module. So instead of having to come to us at EMHware to have something added to a dropdown or something like that, you can do a lot of that yourself with this module. So I'm going to click on the Global Consents tab up here at the top. And again, I have a search area. So if I wanted to, search for all of the consents that are expired or that are coming up to be expired, I can use any of these fields to search. So I can search by a program or a worker. I can use the form type to search or any of these dropdowns. I can also add a new one in from here. So just like the other global tabs, I can add a new consent from the global tab. I just would have to specify what client I was adding it into. And you'll also see a drop down here beside the user menu for the consent administration. So this is really helpful because I can use this drop down to maintain those drop down lists that you see in the module. So the consent methods, scopes, reasons, revoked reasons, I can add or remove any of those options myself. So if you remember when we were in the consent module, these are the options that were in the consent methods. So obviously your agency can have whatever they need for any of those drop downs that they would want. Same with scopes and reasons, and it's really easy. If you needed to add a new one, you can just add a new one using the new button. If you wanted to deactivate one that you no longer want, you can also open them up and uncheck active. You'll also see in the consent administration dropdown a spot for consent defaults. So this is where you can actually set up some of the configurations for your consent module. So here is where I mentioned the default number of days to expiry. So again, that's set to 365, but you can have that set whatever you want. It could still be changed based on the type of consent that you're filling out. This is just how it's going to default in the module. There's some different headers here if you wanted to put your own instructions or information in any of those in those text spots. And then at the bottom, you'll see there's a space or a button, a section to put in how many days till the consent is reviewed. And this is really helpful, and this kind of goes into the last thing that I'm going to show you with this module, is that when a consent is coming up to be expired, your workers can actually get that notification on their dashboard. So just like they would see an appointment, or if you have the OCAN module, they would see the OCANs coming up to be reviewed. They could see that for consents. So this one's set to 30, but you could set that to however many days that you would want that to show up for the workers. And I'll just give you an idea of what that looks like from the worker's perspective. So I'm just going to go to the dashboard, and I'm just going to jump to June of 2022 so that you can see what that looks like. So you can see that that one consent in Ruby's file was set to expire in June of 2022 or July, and it's telling me on my dashboard that I have consents due, and I can click on that. Obviously, just like you can with anything on the dashboard, you can click on that to give you a list of what consents are needing to be reviewed on that day. So that's pretty much all that I had to show you for the consent module. And like Peter mentioned, it looks like there's lots of questions in the chat. So I'm not sure, Peter, if you want me to go through and answer those, or what you want, how you want to do this, but
yeah, definitely. If you could answer, I think there's like 4 or 5 questions in there right now, Joanna.
Sure. Just let me bring up the chat here. So would the traffic light be yellow if any of the consents are out of date? So yes, it would be yellow if if the client has multiple consents and there's any that are coming up to be expired, it would be yellow, or if any of them are expired, it would show up as red, and it would stay green if all consents are up to date. Is the signature line in the case data for a staff member to sign? Yes, in that example case data form that I had done up, it was just a line for the client to sign, but there could be, it depends on what case data form you have. So you could have a line for the worker and the parent and the client, or however you have the form set up. And then the second part to that question, is there a way for the parent or caregiver to sign electronically through the system? There definitely is. That was where I pointed out the client portal button. So that's a separate module where the client or the parent or caregiver would be able to log in and see anything that you've chosen to share with them. So I believe there is a discovery day for the client portal, so you can see that in more detail then, but there is definitely connection between the two modules if you wanted the client to be or the parent to be able to sign in and sign that form electronically. Yeah, and that kind of goes to the same question as Lisa's. It was the staff signing, but you can have whatever signature lines you want on there. So it works the same as the case data section if you use that for consents. Peter, I don't know, there's a question about the cost. I think that we had talked about contacting EMHware support to get a quote for this if you are interested. So you can definitely just shoot us an email if you're interested in the cost or the how this module is implemented with your agency. You can just contact us and we'll let you know.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, reach out to us directly if you have any questions regarding implementing this. We can go through another demo of it as well quickly if you do have any questions of any other staff who couldn't make it today. We are recording the meeting as well, so we'll be sending that out to people who are interested in having that in their records.
what if you don't want to renew the consent when it expires? So that is a good question. I think in that event, you would be able to make it not active, and then it wouldn't make the traffic light red, so showing that it was expired. So if it's no longer valid, then you should be able to make it not active. And that might be something, like I said, that they are working on a better way to do that, because I know that there's a lot of changes coming to this module in the near future. And this kind of goes into the next question as well, as with the multiple programs. So there is a way to share the consent across multiple programs, and there is a couple different ways you can do that. So you can use the program privacy sharing. There's an option for multi-select programs, so it's not just a single dropdown, or you can use the single dropdown if you wanted. And then it looks like there's also going to be the option to not have to select a program. It says, but I'm not sure if that'll be a configuration. So if you want that on, we can turn that on. And Peter, yeah, you can share the support email in the chat there if you want. Yeah, and that's a great suggestion, Kim, to leave the end date blank. That will work. It will work that way. However, I feel like for historical purposes, you might want to be able to see when it expired. So we'll definitely, there might be a way to do that already that I just am not sure about. I always get questions that I didn't go over in my head before the call. So that one I'm not sure, but I could definitely find out. Can consent be shared with different agencies who also use EMHware? So that would be around the same lines of using the electronic referral system through from an EMHware to EMHware agency. All you would have to do is PDF the consent and to the client's attachments, and then you could just attach it to the referral as an attachment, just like you can with anything else that you attach. Right now, it would just go over as an attachment. There could be the possibility in the future of it going into their consent module tab if they have that module as well. But right now it would just go over as an attachment. So Bailey's just asking, I mean, I guess everyone can see the chat. If you don't have a family sign the consent on their own, what is the purpose of the consent module? And yeah, your next question is about verbal consent. So lots of our agencies have a checkbox instead of the line just for, the client provided verbal consent. But you could also use, if you have made use of the client portal, you could have them publish it to the client portal, and then they would be able to go in and fill it out and sign it themselves. Or if you have, I know some of our agencies also have signature devices where, if the client was in the office, they would be able to sign it within EMHware with you there. Or another option is if you do have paper consent forms, so maybe your agency doesn't use electronic signatures, you can still use the module to track like all of the other stuff that's tracked in there, like the circle of care and the substitute decision maker and even the expiry date. And then you could just use the attachments option to upload the paper copy of that attachment. So a lot of our agencies do that currently with even just within the case data section. If they don't, either if they didn't get an electronic signature or they don't use that option, they still use the module just as an electronic tracking purpose for a form that they might have on paper, and you just have to upload it as an attachment and it'll always be there. And then, yeah, that's the last part of Bailey's comment there was about using the traffic light function. So yeah, if you didn't have them sign electronically, you could still use this, and then you would be able to track whether the consent was expired or not. And then you'd always be able to see if there was an attachment with the actual signed consent, or even if you just had the verbal consent checkbox on the form. Andrea, yes, the client portal is a separately purchased feature, which again, like I mentioned, I think that there is one of these sessions on the client portal. So you'll be able to see more information about that on that date. I'm not sure what date that is. I'm sure Peter can pull that up, but yeah, it is a separate module as well.
Yes, our client portal session is on September 9th. So in the fall, our next session is actually going to be on the goal planning, and that's going to be on July 6th. And just to reference back to the pricing, we actually do have Kirsten on the line, so she can actually hop on and just talk about pricing very briefly right now.
Hi, thank you. To answer your question earlier, Sarah, the costing for the module is $1,000 per year annually. There is an additional, to clarify, there is not additional initial setup fees in order to get that on your instance. So it's just $1,000 per year annually. Moving forward, if anybody on this call needs any formalized quotes to put forward, let me know and I'll get those all prettied up for you. Otherwise, if you just need to put in a request to support for activation, that's just fine, and we'll make sure to put this the support link in the chat. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kirsten. So I think I answered all of the questions that were in the chat, but like we mentioned earlier, you can always contact the support team if you do have any questions, or whoever your contact is at EMHware. I'm sure they'd be happy to point you in the right direction or answer any questions you have. And like Kirsten said, if you do need a formal quote, she can definitely provide that for you as well.
Awesome. So unless there's any other questions, I just want to remind that the next session is going to be on July 6th. I'm going to send out another couple of emails just reminding you with meeting links similar to what we're happening today. And as always, if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to us and also forward the meeting invitation to anybody who might want to take a look at that. The recording, I'll have the recording, so I'll send it over directly to anybody who's interested. And also in the chat, if you want to take a look at my email, I'm going to put that in there. And if you do any questions, like if you want the recording or anything like that, just let me know. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. You have a fantastic afternoon. Hope you guys are enjoying the weather, and we'll see you next time.